Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Dad Dads podcast. So, if you've ever been through, or maybe you're currently going through, or even contemplating divorce, then this interview with Keegan Burke is definitely for you. Keegan spent 11 long years going through the divorce and custody process. He has basically seen and been through it all. Now, Keegan has taken that experience and has become a divorce strategist, helping others achieve the best and most stress-free outcome. Keegan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, okay, tell me this. So you're a divorce coach or divorce strategist, correct?
Correct.
What is that?
So a divorce strategist is almost self-explanatory, but not really. I think divorce is a pretty big category. It's an important one, especially for men. And I think that ultimately the goal is to help a man understand what he is up against. What is the road forward going to look like? My job is to analyze the case, evaluate strong points, weak points, economics, right? That's a big one. Preparation. Yeah. If you're in a relationship or you're thinking about divorce, lots of guys go through the is it cheaper to keep her kind of consideration, but have no idea how to evaluate that. So I do a lot of the kind of economic underwriting of divorce, right? What should you expect to spend? What will you want to spend money on? How do you prioritize that spend? Lots of men under measure, right? So we expect it to be a lot cheaper. I think oftentimes we get not false, but misrepresented guidance around the cost from attorneys.
Right.
The economics are important when it comes to selecting your attorney. It's important when it comes to directing your attorney to focus on certain things. The economics are important when it comes to making decisions around what you should be prioritizing as it relates to your time, attention, and energy. So I think that's kind of the overall point. Also, from a strategic standpoint, whether you have an attorney or not, I have found that some folks ask the question, do I need a strategist if I have an attorney? And the attorneys would generally say yes. And so would the client, because it's one of those things where we, men and women really, go through the process of intraday challenges, right? Exchanges, communications, mishaps, health issues, whatever it is. And you don't necessarily want to put those activities or decisions or things that you're dealing with in front of your attorney at 500 plus an hour.
Right.
Right. So, and because it's really probably not a legal conversation. The flip side of that point is that while it may not be a legal conversation, what you're doing could be used in your legal arguments. So you want to make sure that you're responding, behaving, and producing the things that matter so that you're not kind of shooting yourself in the foot along the way. The other part is from a coaching standpoint, right? Whether you have an attorney or not. Attorneys speak way over most guys' heads.
Right.
We're not legal experts. We haven't been in a courtroom. We're not manipulative by nature, right? So it's like
Right.
an attorney might say something, we might get served something, we might need to do something, and we have no idea. It's like deer in headlights. So it's sort of that like sounding board, that grounding piece to your overall experience as a man, and it's very hard. The other kind of final point that I would say that I really think is important from a strategist standpoint is, are you prepared to take this battle on? It is not a short one. It requires patience. It requires a plan. It requires almost an unimaginable dedication to your cause. And if you're not really prepared to do that, then don't get in with one toe in the water. You have to jump into the pool. And a strategist is going to help you kind of make that decision and then help you along the way. Be your, life raft, if you will. So
Right.
those are kind of the general topics, and it's pretty wide reaching. And that's what I do.
Going through a divorce, I can say that is a lot. You do need somebody in all aspects of that. I did not have a coach during that time. maybe the service was available. I wasn't aware of it, but man, that would be so helpful. So, what got you into this? Tell me your background. How do you know about this? I know there's probably not a class on it. Why are you so good at this?
Yeah, and it's
Have so
funny
much knowledge.
what you just said is actually exactly why I'm doing it. Um, and it's I wish I had me going through my divorce. So my background's, finance tech, so, pretty detail oriented, organized. That's why the economics is an important piece of it. Planning, strategy, all of that is kind of the foundation of my existence.
Right.
But I've been through a Hollywood-esque divorce in California. It won't
Uh,
do us any good to get into the nitty-gritty details of it, but my experience is it was 11 years, custody battle that was a 5-day trial. I have been accused of anything that you can imagine, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, sexual assault. I have had fabricated evidence produced. I have had fabricated testimony. I have been set up at staged assaults where they've tried to have me arrested for assaulting her father. I've had pictures actually produced and testified to me beating her up, which again we
Jeez.
can get into the details of the false evidence and false allegations later. I have been accused of molesting my kids on 2 separate occasions, and I have
Oh,
3 boys. So my experience is pretty extensive. My first year in divorce, I think I was in the courtroom 27 days. I mean, that's a
oh my
lot of
gosh.
time in a courtroom. And you don't sit
And a
there
lot
and
of
deal with
money.
just your case. You're watching other cases. You're watching
Yeah.
how it goes. And so I just have a lot of experience as it relates to the process. And some folks would be like, well, I mean, every state is different, and it is. But the general notions are blanket, right? And I'm not a lawyer. I'm
Yep.
not providing legal advice. It's really more tactical and strategic in the way you manage yourself in the process so that you have an opportunity for success. So that's my background. And that's why I'm actually doing it, because I couldn't find me when I was going through it. I mean, we have a lot
Right.
more social media at our fingertips now, but still, and by the way, to that point, I see what really made me do it the way I'm doing it now is I've helped dads for years and years and years, on a one-on-one basis, kind of consultative. And over the last couple years, I've seen more and more, I don't know, content creators, if you will, just
Hmm.
trying to put out the feel good, the how do
Right.
you heal, how do you this, how do you that, and it's all really noise. It's not something that you can take and go, how do I protect my rights? How do I
Right.
protect my freedom? How do I protect my finances and my custody? And so that's where, I was like, okay, I've got a book, I've got the templates, I've been doing it, I've been through it myself. It's time to scale. It's time to give back and really provide tangible guidance to dads who need it.
So you've learned this by going through it, by being serving in the trenches. Man,
That's
I mean, there's probably no better way to learn it, but I hate you've had to go through it, but I do appreciate you sharing it. And I do think that we go through things in life and we're supposed what we learn from those we're supposed to give back, right? Supposed to help others to maybe make their path easier. I hate you've had to go through it, but it seems like you have gone through hell. So are you telling me 11 years, like from start to finish, that you were going through the divorce slash custody process?
Yeah, so the case was
Jeez.
bifurcated. And bifurcation just means that they separated the primary topics, right? Assets and
Right.
liabilities and custody. It was pretty early in the case that the judge realized we need to get the custody thing figured out quickly.
Yeah.
I had divorced her while she was pregnant with number three. So started with 50-50 right off the get-go, while she was pregnant. Then, getting to the baby was a difficult task. But at the end of that kind of early process, it was sole custody, sole physical, sole legal. She was given no overnights, monitored visits, and all due to kind of that attention to detail, doing the extra things, a little bit of luck, maybe grace of God, um, but an unwillingness to quit because all of it was centered around protecting the children.
Yeah.
And so that was my driving factor. And thankfully, I was one of not many who was able to do that. So,
Yeah, because that's you don't hear that from many dads where they're able to. I know it's tough, and it's kind of a case by or state by state as well. Sometimes it's not even state by state; it's judge by judge. But yeah, so congratulations on that. So tell me this. I mean, there's so much I want to get into, but if we're one question I have is, do you work with you work with, of course, the person going through a divorce? Do you act as sort of a liaison between them and their attorney, or do you let them keep that communication between them and their attorney, or
good
how
question.
is that?
It's really case by case. So
Okay.
depending on the attorney and the client, I'm happy to sit in on meetings, right? So be a translator, if you will, an
Mm-hmm.
intermediary. Um, it's I oftentimes try to provide some guidance going into the meeting with the attorney so that they can handle it. They come out and we get to work on certain elements, certain management features, certain tactics, certain communications with the opposing side, not opposing counsel, but opposing spouse
Right.
or relationship. So it really is case by case. It just depends on the need.
Okay. Okay. And I tell you what, again, after going through it, I know there's times when, and you're getting all this paperwork, you're getting emails from your attorney, and it is so much to consume. And I remember my attorney telling me one time, it's like she was like, "Look, this is such a small matter. Is it worth paying X amount of dollars to fight over this one little detail?" And I imagine having somebody like you that's not you're in the game, but you're not right there on the field in that play where you can kind of look at it from a different view and say, hey, look, let's take some breaths. Let's relax. Here's what this means. Here's the ramifications of it. Here's how it'll affect things. Is this worth it or not? Probably not, or probably so. That would be so helpful to have that. So helpful.
Yeah, it's sort of like back when I was in, pure finance, it was I can give you the economic guidance and you can make the emotional decision. It's
Yeah.
almost the same thing. It translates in the same way, right? I can give you the general synopsis, but you're going to have to make the emotional decision as to does that meet your standards of moving forward on this topic or not. So it's interpretation ultimately, right?
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into it. Some of the biggest obstacles that you see men face when they're going through a divorce or custody hearing. What are some of those?
Yeah, I think the first and most would probably just ring this bell, and that's the system.
Hmm.
The laws are equal. Application of the law is not. It
That's a good way to
just
put it.
is. It's a reality that we face as men. It's um, you know, we step up to the plate, and in order to get to the table, we have to climb Mount Everest first. And
Yeah.
so the system incentivizes women. It gives them a whole lot more leeway. Family law is a unique legal system framework anyway, just from an evidentiary standpoint, process, etc. Um, and so I think that's one, the system. Two, men, us, we, ourselves, are our second biggest obstacle. We are not designed to navigate this process well. We are providers, we are protectors. Just our general demeanor is we're the bad guy from the jump. We are a little bit more curt when we finally get pressed to a response. We have a tough time managing our responses because we do have emotions. They're just a little bit deeper. And
Yeah.
so the opposing side does a really good job of poking a whole bunch of holes and hoping that you blow out one of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that we are generally ignorant, and that's not necessarily a derogatory point. It's like, why would we know the system?
Yeah.
But we are generally ignorant to what we have to do, too. We lack a certain amount of accountability, and that's because we are either dismissive or too hopeful that it will
Hmm.
work itself out.
It's a good way
To
to put it.
lots of men get served stuff and don't do anything with it, right? It's like, like, it is whatever. They're upset. They're too busy. They're working. They're doing their life, which is what we all sign up and wake up and do every single day. Um, But ultimately, I think too, we are terrible at our control kind of measures, and that's control around how you say, what you say, when you say, because the system, the first biggest obstacle, is really designed to be, we're punching bags, and so it's just we're constantly being bombarded with what I would call wrongs, right? We are
Yeah.
going to be wronged, and it gets old, and it gets old really fast. So the third one, I think bad advice is a
Hmm.
big obstacle for men, friends, family, even counsel. Um, I think lots of people get bad advice, and it's not an intentional bad advice, right? It's people wanting to help, but they're not necessarily attached to the outcome like the man is. And so there's no way for them to give really good advice, sound advice that is considerate of all the things that most people that are giving the advice don't know about or don't understand. And I would go so far as to say even counsel gives bad advice because they're paid to do so. A perfect example, right? I'll give you
Hmm.
a small example of that.
Yeah, I want to hear about this.
Counsel is not incentivized to tell you, don't respond to this. You don't need to focus on that. You don't need to do this. A man who's upset about a certain situation, maybe a timeshare change or, some discovery request, right? An attorney is going to say, well, we can respond to this. I can write this letter. We can file this motion. We can do this deposition. Why? Because they're paid to do that. Why wouldn't they do that? There's nothing stopping them from doing that, especially if there are economics that back it and the attorney is going to know that. But is anybody there going, hey, that's not that important? You don't actually need to do that, and here's another path forward, or maybe we can merge that with something else later. And so counsel is sort of the same thing, right? I think they are absolutely paramount. If you can, you should have an attorney. If it's not for the process and administrative stuff and filings, at least in a courtroom. Have a
Yeah.
day attorney, right? A stand in for the day to make your arguments. No judge wants to talk to a civilian. They want to talk to somebody who knows the court rules and the process. So even attorneys give bad advice because why wouldn't they? Right? So,
Good point. I've never thought about that, but you're right.
and
Yeah.
then the final piece of bad advice is our own. We, as men, are living our lives, we're sharing our homes, we're raising our kids, we're providing for our families. And then one day, if it's not our decision, we're sideswiped by the fact that wife is gone, has probably taken the kids, and all of that time that's consumed by that kind of ecosystem disappears. We're living in a vacuum of our own minds, our own
Yep.
struggles, our own experience. Listen, we're not prepared to make good, sound decisions when you get stuck in that vacuum. I'm an advocate for buttoning down the hatches and picking the right people to have around you, but isolation isn't good either.
Yeah.
So it's
Good
one of
point.
those really tough situations that you have to manage through.
Yeah. Man, I think about the different ones with me when I was going through it. I did not have a coach, but it is so important with those that you surround yourself with. I've said it before. I did not want a lot of yes. I didn't want any yes people. I really didn't. You have those in your life where they will tell you, yeah, you're right. Oh, screw her. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, she's horrible. I wanted people, and I really kind of did narrow down the little circle that told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And I feel like that was paramount. I mean, that was so very important
Totally.
to kind of help me through that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's hard to do. I mean, it's
Yeah.
because you just have no, I mean, literally you're standing in the middle of a field and you don't know. And by the way, it's not just a field, it's a field littered with mines.
With mines. When you said that, I was thinking, yeah, filled
Yeah.
with landmines.
And so you're going, I don't know which direction to go here. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing that I think is a major, major obstacle for men is because the system and the process is designed to incentivize women. They're given more leash. The hyperfixation on us being wronged, right? It's like we tend to just grab
Great
all
point.
of the, are they huge deals? Is it a big problem? No, not that small thing, but it's just this totality of little things, and we fixate on the little things rather than trying to pull out or combine those little things into one big topic. And so that hyperfixation on where we're being wronged really undermines the process for us. It creates poor responses, poor behavior. Um, it's really kind of takes our attention off the most important parts of our argument,
Mm-hmm.
the most valuable
Mm-hmm.
things of our argument. It can be interpreted as control, right? I mean, that's a negative thing when it comes to being a man, and maybe they're driving some narrative around aggression or control freak or whatever it might be. But it is, that perception piece that's important too. And what a time suck to lose that for mental, sanity on an
Yeah.
individual basis, but also for resources for people helping you. Do you want to spend a half an hour talking about XYZ and it really doesn't matter?
Yeah.
So, helping
Yeah.
get through that is also another thing that I think one, a strategist is going to do, or a coach, but it is a big problem and obstacle that I see all the time. I mean, so many conversations that I have
I
with men
bet.
are about things that it's like, I know that's important to you. I know that it's wrong, but this isn't that important when it comes to the grand scheme of things. So,
And that's the thing, is looking at it from a big picture. And so that's where you're really able to kind of clear that up for everybody.
yeah. And so I made a note to bring it up, and it was the obstacles, but kind of parlaying into common mistakes, the things that I think are like exacerbate the obstacles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so a couple things that I had written down was, I think that it's twofold. One, we need to do a better job of picking our partners. I'm guilty as sin of that. I ignored red flags for days. I
Mm.
was young, I was successful, I wanted to be a dad, but probably should have, picked a different path. Silver lining, three beautiful children, the whole 9 yards. But ultimately, it's waiting to make a move. It's not identifying that we need to be more proactive in protecting our interests. It's this passiveness, it's this hopefulness, it's that maybe it's even reconciliation. Also guilty, right? My ex was arrested for DV. I reconciled, had two more kids after the fact. That humongous mistake. And so I think for men, it's like when we sign up, we generally do sign up for the long term. We want to figure out how to make it work. So many men
We're
are,
fixers.
yeah, 100%. That's
Yeah.
a great way to put it. Um, and so I think that's a major thing that needs to be addressed, for men is, where are we at and what do I need to do? And I think too, the other thing that we ignore is women will stay in a marriage and plan their way out, and they won't do it in a week. They'll do it over years.
Over
I
years.
know
Yeah. 2 years or
women,
more. Yeah. Yeah.
know women today who are in marriages and they are just waiting for another year to tick or a job to change or something to
Yep.
happen where they get to hit the exit button.
Yeah.
And that's what men are ignorant of, or hopeful that that isn't the case. And so I think increasing our vigilance and awareness is going to be really important for enabling success. Other mistakes, no plan, right? I mean, divorce is war. I don't know anybody who would go into war. They don't know what their stockpile looks like. They don't know what weaponry they have. They don't know anything about their enemy. You got to have a plan. Not having a
Yeah.
plan is a plan to fail. Um, Another one, common mistake. Just because, and this analogy goes back to the field and the landmines, right? Most men go, okay, well, I don't know anything about this process. They just go get an attorney. And it's like, okay, yes, advocate for attorneys, work with lots of them. But now you're just sitting in the field in a tank, but you still have landmines all around you. And yeah, the attorney's going to drive the tank for you or shoot the gun, but you got to pick and still weave around some of those landmines, and having a
Right.
plan is really important. And by the way, if you get the plan first, it helps you pick your attorney. Do you need a man? Do you need a woman? What is their experience? Is it negotiation? Is it litigation? Is it, allegations of abuse? What is their expertise? And I'll give you an example. I have had a handful of attorneys. First attorney, I spent, well, I'll tell you, $60,000 writing letters at the very beginning of my case. I mean, I didn't realize what a waste that was. She did several great things, but I could have gone with fewer letters. I can tell you that. I've had attorneys where I've had to fire them in the courtroom because they're trying to back down my argument. And I'm going, no, this is the argument. Your Honor, I'm not changing my moving papers, and I'm not changing I'm ready to go to trial. And see you later. The attorney I settled on, when I went and had my consult with him, I know my case better than anybody. Most men generally know their case inside and out, but you have to have that good kind of synergy with the attorney. The attorney put me on my heels on my case. So he started questioning me about my case, and his ability to interrogate me on examination was, I'm going to trial. Everything's ready. I'm going to trial. That's the type of attorney I need now. I don't need one that can put, paperwork together and know certain laws. I need the guy the modern day Matlock in the courtroom. How's he going to examine? How's he going to cross-examine? How's he going to bring evidence to the table? That's what I needed. And so those are all kind of the nuances of attorney selection. Don't just run to an attorney. And by the way, I'd much rather spend $1,000 or $2,000 on consults, right? The $450 or $500 an hour, than wasting a $10,000 retainer on an attorney I shouldn't have picked.
True. Don't you think we do a bad job? I think this is, and I am not knocking attorneys. I think attorneys are necessary, and I can tell attorney jokes with the best of them. But, I get, with my business, I get very frustrated with attorneys at times. But what I see talking to different guys is they're not in control of their attorney, where they basically are letting their attorney control everything. A lot of times my conversation goes back to them. Well, is this really what you want? Is this where you're wanting to go? Is this how you're wanting? Well, no, but my attorney says this, and my attorney wants to do this. And, and I've told several, tell your attorney no. Remind them you're the one paying them. They work for you.
100% agree. And from a man's perspective, that trickles down into the accountability bucket, right?
Yeah.
We are accountable for our case, our success, everything that matters to us.
Yeah.
And then it flows up to what is priority in your case. Is that what you want? And you need to make those decisions, and then you need to point your weaponry in the right direction, right? Your attorney is a tool to help you be successful. And you are the one that is ultimately pointing that tool in the right direction to take out your enemy. And so I completely agree. It's same thing that I said earlier. They're incentivized just to go chase and do everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And if that's not a priority for you, you're wasting time, money, energy, resources.
Yeah. Remember how they're paid. They're paid by the hour.
That's right.
So
and that $10,000 retainer that signed them up disappears very quickly.
Tell me somebody that has received a refund from their retainer.
I haven't met anybody.
I've never heard anybody. I've had conversations. People have said, well, I had to give a $10,000 retainer, a $15,000 retainer, but they said it shouldn't cost that much. And it's like, yeah. We'll see how long this thing can be drug out.
Yeah.
So, all right. So tell me this. I want to get in, when you mentioned false allegations, I want to get into that and false evidence. Are there some myths that maybe men have heard, or myths that are out there? Tell me about those.
So I think the biggest myths are that dads can't win. We're seeing more and more dads win. And I think that it's because we are seeing more, the laws have become more equitable, but generally speaking, they're also being applied a little bit better too. I think most people are recognizing that there really needs to be a larger, bigger, stronger effort to keeping dads in their kids' lives. And so
Yeah.
a lot of states, a lot of courts are looking for ways to do that versus just pulling the plug on the dad. And so long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and then try to climb Mount Everest, that in itself is going to give you a much better chance at winning. Listen, that does not mean that even if you do everything right, you won't lose something, or you won't lose, or you won't,
Right.
or that you're going to get your way. That's just not the reality of it. And I can testify to that point too, right? Not everything works out the way you want it to, and I do this stuff.
Right.
But you can win. You just have to be accountable, and you have to do the necessary things to do that. And then the other one is, I hear guys that are on the crappy end of the table or the low end of the totem pole, and they say, oh, well, I have nothing on the books. I've tried everything. There's nothing I can do. Family law is you're never in a position where there's nothing you can do. If you're not happy with the situation, it may not be something you can do tomorrow, but that's the whole point. It started with patience. It's going to end with patience. It's a long road. And you can keep doing things. You have to go back to the drawing board. You have to reevaluate your situation. There are things that you can do to move your case forward. And I think too many men believe that that's not the case. Once the order is the order, it's never going to change. No way. That family law, custody orders are dynamic. There are generally ways that you can move the ball forward.
That's good. That's good. It depends state by state, and it's country by country as well. But I do feel like it is some places it is moving faster or getting more fair, if you want to say that, for guys. It's progressing a little bit better than others. But I do think you are seeing that. I think too, people are starting to, whether it's the courts, whatever it may be, they're starting to realize the importance of dads. Where so long it was just, hey, he's a provider. He's the wallet, let him be. But they're starting to realize that, and the evidence is out there. I mean, my goodness, we have, we spotlighted it so many times on here. I've had so many people talk about it where looking at the statistics for a child raised in a two-parent home is almost identical as a child raised by their father but then when you look at when it's raised by a single mother, there's a higher rate of incarceration, higher dropout rate from high school, all of these things, higher rate of suicide. There's reasons for that. I'm not saying it's because of single moms, that there's more single moms out there, but I think now that the court systems are getting more educated, more aware of this. And look, I've said it 100 times and I totally believe it. I think part of the reason why we're seeing what we're seeing in society today and what we complain about day in and day out, we complain about the youths and the crimes and all this stuff. I totally believe that comes back to the lack of fathers being involved. Or no father in the household. I mean, it definitely is, easy thing. You can look at these mass shootings, whether it's a school shooting, whether it's, happening on the streets, whatever. I've done some deep dives into that, and the percentages are staggering when you start looking where there's no dad at home. There's no father at home, no father involved in their life. And I think the court systems are finally starting to see that, hopefully.
Yeah, they have to. And I think, too, we need to keep pushing for more education, more reform as men, as dads across the board. And really, women. Women are just as much a participant in this dysfunction, right? I mean,
I agree.
Why does a man have to fight to be with his kids just because you guys didn't work out? He was with his kids every day when you were working out.
Yeah, I don't get. I mean, that I feel like is a form of child abuse.
Well, but there's a motivation to it, and it's economic. So they're incentivized.
I think that's it. I think that's it on most cases. I do. I think it's economics. I think it's also, in ways just to punish the dad as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do. How much pain can I give him?
Yeah.
So you brought it up, false allegations and false evidence. You've obviously, unfortunately, experienced that. Let's say you're faced with that. What do you recommend? A guy comes to you, he's like, look, my ex or soon to be ex is, saying I'm abusive. She's saying I'm a bad dad. She's saying I'm not involved. She's saying I'm, whatever, sexually assaulted her or the kids or whatever. How do you handle that? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So a couple things, and this is a really big topic. One,
hold on. And before you answer that, Keegan, it feels like that is becoming more and more common. Maybe it's just because I'm in this space now, but from the people I talk to and the messages I receive, gosh, I feel like it's out there so overwhelmingly.
It's overwhelming because it is the nuclear option. It is the silver bullet that negates all things. And it is, I don't want to say 100% of the time, but I'll say 100% of the time directed at the man being the perpetrator against the woman or the children.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there have been movements and or perspectives that just say, hey, no matter what, we have to believe the fact that it was the man that was the perpetrator. And we continue to realize over time, as it continues to unfold, that that's just not true. But as a man, because we do see it so often, and you see it, I see it, you have to presume that you're going to be accused of some type of abuse, some type of aggression, and you have to behave and manage yourself accordingly. If you're in a relationship, you need to identify signs that that's possible. What do I mean by that? I actually just posted about this topic yesterday. I'll give you an example. In my case, she had been arrested for DV, and of course I held all the cards. But it was after that, when we reconciled, it was about trying to turn the tables. Right now, now she needs to make me the abuser. And so I'd be downstairs and I'd get a text message, don't you ever talk to me like that. And if you ever do this to me again, and I'm like looking at my phone going, am I in the Twilight Zone?
What the hell?
I haven't seen her for an hour and a half. I've been on the couch. And so you if that doesn't just lights flashing, alarm bells in your head, then you're being too dismissive and too hopeful or too passive. And so I think for men, identifying signs that maybe they exaggerate an argument, or when they're telling a story to a friend, or you get in an argument and the friend's around and they're making you seem like the aggressor, you need to put in the back of your mind that if this goes sideways, the relationship falls apart, that's where they're going. And so identifying those things early, whether it's texts, calls, witnesses, etc. Increasing your vigilance is the first way to navigate and manage it. But that also means increasing control over the way you behave. And this is kind of what we talked about earlier. We get angry. We might raise our voice. We generally, I think far fewer than our accused raise their hand, right? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you should raise your voice. I think that there are men or situations where yelling and screaming is abusive, right? It's not like that doesn't happen, but making sure you're in control of yourself so that doesn't is the first step to defending against those types of things. If you can personally sit down and know that you've never crossed the line or walked into the gray area where that accusation, even if it's exaggerated, holds any weight, there's just a certain level of confidence that you have across the board going in anything. And so that's one. Increasing your control over your behavior, your actions, your speech. If you're on a phone call and she's with her girlfriends and you get in an argument and you're screaming and yelling, guarantee you're on speakerphone.
Yeah.
Guarantee she's got 3 witnesses now.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of that as a man. And we just aren't. The other thing, document everything. So let's say you get that text that is exaggerating something or a completely false narrative across the board. Hit it head on. Deny it. Put it in writing. Summarize your situation. Explain that that's not the proper context. Just make sure that you've got some plausible in context. Like lots of times text messages will come. I read guys' text messages with their exes, and the whole thing is taken out of context, right? If he says I'm done with you, she'll use that as I'm going to kill you. And you need to provide context. Don't leave it vague and ambiguous to where it could be used against you. That's again managing the way you handle your everything. And listen, that's just improved operating management in your day-to-day life. Like just be very clear. And if something comes up, clearly deny it or provide the context. And I would argue that there are often times where if it's like an argument, it's probably two ways, right? Women yell, women scream, women are abusive to men, whether we want to admit it or not as men. So making sure that you kind of level the playing field with facts, it's worth doing so that when you go to that, when that text comes up as evidence later, you've got some counter to it that's time-stamped, that's relevant, and it's situational. Start journaling. Guys, what I did was I created an email that was, the KB Daily. And, you're on your phone sitting in bed. Just if there's nothing, just say nothing to report on the day or start bullets, right? This happened, anything major, anything familial, just start doing that. Whether you're in a relationship or especially in a separated environment, right? You need to be journaling everything anyway. Everything becomes evidence. Not everything is usable, but everything is something that you want to have together. Correcting the record, check your local laws for recording. If it's a single party state, we got Ring cameras, we've got Arlo cameras, we've got spy cameras, we've got recording devices. Your phone now you can hit the top left button and record a phone call.
Yeah.
Now, again, you have to know the laws.
Right.
But if you do that, that is a massive win to being able to undermine an allegation. And then the other one is consider third parties. So I've got two examples here. Most men probably wouldn't go to this extent, but in my situation, what ultimately led to the divorce was my ex-wife wanted a nanny, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. And then I thought about it, and I was like, me too. I want, at this point, given all the things that were happening in our household, a third-party witness. I know my behavior is spot on. I am like, I dot every I, cross every T. I've never been aggressive. I've never done anything wrong. I don't have to worry about my behavior. She has to worry about hers. I want a witness. Well, that was a humongous piece that I won't get into the details, but that nanny came to me with details that ultimately forced me into filing for divorce while she was pregnant number 3.
Wow.
The second piece of using a third party, again, in a separation and like in flight, third parties become really important. And I'm not talking use your sister, your mom, your brother. Those are biased witnesses, and
right.
Opposing counsel can cut them apart all day long. Get a professional. Use a monitor. In my case, so there's a video that has like millions and millions of views of a staged assault found by the court of staged assault.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Well, after a handful of situations similar to that, the court actually took the position that these videos or videoing can enhance or create more animosity at an exchange. And I hear that all the time now, courts saying no videoing, no cameras at exchanges. Well, now what if you're a man, right? Now you're exposed to he said, she said. I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. I hired a professional monitor from the court's list, and I said, I want you at every exchange. And so you're going to be there, and you're going to provide your monitor's note, time-stamped, describe what happened, who was there, and you're going to witness the exchange. And when I had my 1 hour per week with my infant, our infant, you're going to monitor my parenting. And when I have that 1 hour with all of our kids, you're going to monitor my parenting. And let me tell you, no dad wants to have a professional monitor watching him interact with his children. It is the most degrading experience.
Yeah, I can't imagine that.
Any man. But I personally took that on, and I said, I'm not going to let somebody else provide a false narrative on how I parent and how these exchanges are going. Those monitors were able to produce copious notes, vet my parenting style, show my ability to manage 3 kids, 2 and under, right, including an infant.
Wow.
They were able to account for a bunch of very sketchy behaviors that took place at exchanges. They were able to account for her spraying her perfume on the infant's head for my hour, right? So by the way, I get messages, why are you spraying perfume on our child? And I'm like, I'm getting them like this. Thank God the monitor had produced
Yeah.
the notes. Right. So I offed that false allegation. Um, the
Well, why
monitor,
the hell was she spraying perfume on the head?
I would say harassment there's no other reason, right? To do something. Oh, but at the same time, that infant boy, I'd get him for my hour while dressed in girls' clothing.
Oh,
So when we're
shit.
talking about spitefulness, it's there. But the
Yeah.
point is this: that that was third party, that was extreme diligence, and it saved, call it my life, if you will, in a lot of ways. It saved the boy's life in some capacity, in keeping them in mind and allowing me to ultimately win. And so when it comes to false allegations, you have to, as a man, go the extra mile. And hopefully that answers the questions. If you've got a DV already, boy, Mount Everest is Mount Everest time too.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't overcome it. The courts generally, public policy is there's an ability to rehabilitate and keep you in your kid's life. It's just, do you have the kahunas to sign up for what that's going to take?
What it's going to take to do it. Back on it, we talked about it earlier. I think we can both agree. I mean, women are a lot more calculated, a lot more strategic when it comes to a divorce. And they do, not saying everyone, but a lot of them do plan well in advance. They know they're just waiting for that final piece of evidence, or that final shoe to drop, or that promotion, or whatever it may be, where us guys are, yeah, we'll fix it, or, oh, it's not going to happen. We are passive. We are. And I do think I guess my point is, to any guys that are listening out there, if you have an inkling, if you have that feeling in your gut, yeah, this is when you need to be aware. This is, if you're in marriage counseling, if you feel the goalposts are always moving, yeah, you should. And, I had one guy tell me that he had created a Google Docs, and he said he had just a couple columns, and it was the date, I think the date and the time, and then like explanation of whatever it may be. And it was the same thing where, she sent me a text accusing me of this and that. I hadn't even seen her for 2 hours. I had been gone, not really sure what this is about, and would go into detail, but just every little thing. He said it didn't take long. And he said, being a Google Docs, he could just, enter it from anywhere, whether it was a work computer or his phone, whatever it was. But I think that is so important. I think the more documentation you have, the better. And if anything too, you can look back on it when you think you're crazy, you can look back on it and go, oh, wow, gosh, this was going on 18 months ago. I forgot about that. Or when you're meeting with attorneys and they're asking you for history, and when you're in such a daze, you can't remember everything. You've got it right there.
The other thing too, for those that are on the road a lot, right? And in our divorce, I was driving a lot. So I'd hit a voice note and I just talk my note, because now you've got transcription tools if you need to transcribe it, or you can just use it, throw it on a thumb drive, it's date stamped, the metadata is attached to it. By the way, that does bring me to false allegations in a courtroom. So this is important too. My case, I had a little bit of a different thing, but keep this in mind when it comes to evidence. We were sitting in the courtroom. It was early in our kind of preliminary hearings, and her attorney drops a folder on my attorney's lap and says, when we go back into the courtroom, we're entering this into evidence. My attorney opens it up. She gets very upset. I kind of am trying to see what it is. They're pictures of my ex, bloody lip, bloody nose, black eye, scratches, scrapes, even a picture of like her knee surgery, right? So like the sutures on her knee. And I kind of start to chuckle. And she's like, this isn't funny. Like, you have some explaining to do, and this is a big problem for you. And I said, no, no, it's not. We're fine. She's like, you tell me what's going on. She wanted to fire me because now she feels like she's got an abuser on her
Yeah.
hands. This law firm wanted nothing to do with that. And so I reached down in my briefcase and I pulled out a phone and I said that those pictures, because I've seen them, are on this phone and they were taken on this phone. And the phone was an old phone of hers that I had, and I knew that those pictures were taken before I had met her. So this comes to evidence because I'm seeing more of this too, where you've got Photoshops, etc.
Right.
You need to ask and really push for the native files, because you can associate metadata, timestamps, locations, etc. So what we did was we knew they were false. We walked into the courtroom. We let them enter them as evidence. We forced her, her mom, her sister, and one of her sisters is a cop, to testify to the validity. And all they testified was that those injuries are the result of him beating her up. So that's early in our case. Guess what I do? I take the phone, I go get an IT imaged. I have that expert come in and testify to the metadata, and he says, listen, this is the date these pictures were taken, this is the location, and that date happens to be before we met.
Wow.
Boom. Toast. Now, if you don't have that, or you don't know enough to chase certain elements of evidence and or argue its admissibility, then those pictures hose me. I'm never seeing it again.
But that happens so often.
All the time.
You hear that unfortunately, from so many people.
Yep.
Where that happens. Ugh. All right. So I'm not accusing your ex of this, but let's say there was you're divorcing somebody where there's a personality disorder, whether it's narcissism, borderline personality disorder, whatever it may be. And again, I'm not accusing your ex of this, but you hear that a lot, where there are false allegations. There are, a lot of these things. What do you do? I mean, because that can be just horrendous on a guy, horrible on a guy.
Yeah. So, and I same thing. I've talked about this a couple times. I'm going to preface it with this: not everyone has a personality disorder. And certainly not everybody that social media would like you to believe has a personality disorder.
Right.
Or everyone has a personality disorder.
Right.
And so I think, though, that's sort of, for men, one of those things, and this is a preface, I'll get into how you handle it, is a false flag. It is too easy of an out or an excuse to associate what's happening to a personality disorder. And the reality is this: is your ex a pain in the butt? Is she confrontational, argumentative, problematic, manipulative? All the things, right? It's the system, the process is literally designed to create friction, right?
Sure.
So will they present some behavior that could be associated as that? Yes. Are they clinically diagnosable? I would argue probably not. Now, I could be convinced that everybody is nuts, and or nobody is nuts but a few of us. But I'm going to err on the side that it's probably less likely that they have a personality disorder, and more likely that you've just got a problem that you need to navigate effectively.
Yeah.
Now, if they are nuts,
and by nuts you mean they have a personality disorder.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
If they have a personality disorder and it's clinically diagnosed, you should get your own professional psychologist to provide the proper guidance on how to navigate that personality disorder. Yeah. So again, back to accountability. Don't try to go at that on your own, right? And I had a really great person give me this advice way back, and it was, you can't reason with somebody who's unreasonable based on that personality disorder. So don't even try. Like that, you're not going to get the response that you'd get from 9 out of the 10 people,
Right.
that one person's going to respond in their own way. Get the professional to give you the guidance so that you can navigate that response mechanism and process. That's one. 2, if you truly believe that the person that you're going up against has some clinical diagnosis that just hasn't been diagnosed, then you can and should pursue getting that diagnosis, get that evaluation.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it is much harder than people will lead you to believe to get that diagnosis. Psychologists, the system is biased, they'll explain it away. I'll give you an example. In one of our 730 evaluations, we had those psychological evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the tests, she came back and the answers are measured in truthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get a truthful score. My ex failed that truth score completely. Every answer was dishonest. The finding was dishonest. The footnote in the report, she was trying to put her best foot forward, and therefore those answers are acceptable because she wanted to put the best foot forward. Meanwhile, all my answers are truthful, but I'm not having a problematic answer. So it's just, that's why I'm not necessarily jumping on the evaluation piece. But generally speaking, the way you navigate personality disorders is disengagement, setting boundaries, and managing yourself. So you stay even keeled. You don't take the bait. You don't get into the weeds of their delusions. Patience in the moments, right? So like you have the broad picture patience, and then you have the momentary patience, the intraday. Don't play their game. It is, and listen, I admit it, it's much harder to do and much easier to say, but for most personality disorders, boundaries, disengagement, and your own self-management and patience is going to give you the best ability to navigate that problem, because here's the advantage you've got in divorce. Nothing happens next day. You can always take what happened, take a message, I say always, most of the time, and decide how to respond to that effectively. And by the way, any response, you're responding to the opposing side, but you're really responding to the court. Once the court's involved, it's really, you're playing a double-edged sword here. Is the response really necessary to her, or is it to the court?
Yeah, that's a good point too, because I think everybody needs to remember that any response you give, anything written, verbal, you should assume that it's going to be recorded.
Yep.
Any response, you should be okay with that being read by the court.
Yeah.
So I think so many people forget that at times.
Yeah.
And that with the personality disorder, I was talking to a family law attorney not too long ago, and he was telling me, I just asked him, we were having a drink, and I'm like, how many people come in when they're first meeting with you and say that, oh, my ex or my husband or my wife is a narcissist? And he started laughing. He's like, oh my gosh. He said, I thought it was bad 10 years ago. He said, it is in the 90s, the percentile. He said, every one of them. And, in his thing, he was talking about how he always tells them, look, don't bring that up in court. Let the court figure that out.
Totally true.
It's managing it yourself, and do not bring up those allegations. The court doesn't want to hear that. They can figure it out themselves, and you just present the evidence. And I think even Erin Shaden, who was on here, she's been on here a few times, she was talking about it. Like, let the court figure that out. You just present the evidence.
Yep.
With that. But again, it's not easy though when you're on that end, and because I know a big thing with narcissism. Dr. Salerno was on here, and he was talking about, it's projections and lies, and and that's tough because they're projecting, their mental illness onto you, and you want to snap back and no, it's not me, it's you, and blah 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 blah. You're the narcissist. You're the one with this. It's tough. It's very tough.
No, it is. It is. It's not an easy thing to do.
I've known guys that have even gone so far as been evaluated themselves, had themselves evaluated So when they were going to court, they actually had, a letter from their psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever it may be, stating, that they've evaluated and they do not possess this. And it's,
Fantastic example of doing the extra thing to preemptively navigate that type of thing, right? I mean, we're all not, like you said, I mean, it's such a frequent accusation or allegation today. What a great way to go about it.
yeah. All right. I have taken up a lot of your time and you are just a wealth of information. And I literally could probably talk to you for another hour. And I don't think this is going to be our last conversation if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Advice for dads. What do you have?
Yeah, advice. I would say get a strategy. I don't care if that's with me or not. Build a plan. Not having a plan is a plan to fail. Identify where you're weak, where you're strong. Evaluate your situation, right? There are some things that just aren't going to be in your favor. Accept that and focus on the things that are in your favor. Or how do you turn the tides on the things that are working against you? Is it short, mid, long term? Where in the process can you have that happen? That helps you kind of start to create this like persistent sustainability and commitment and dedication, right? It's like lose a couple battles, win the war. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so really, I think number one is get a strategy, do it now. If you're in the process, fine, reset the table, step back, look at your situation. Where are you going? If you're in a marriage or a relationship, is that where you're going to be? And if you want to get out, start planning. Don't just jump out, right? It's like a spring. Don't just jump off it. It's going to explode. So planning and prioritizing is associated with that strategy. I think too, this is something that I have had to have a couple conversations with folks, and that's make some really tough decisions. I think that some men feel obligated to fight and they don't necessarily want to. They don't want it. They're okay with the outcome, but they fight anyway, and they spend a ton of money. Maybe ultimately it's the kids' money, right? Or and so you create animosity, and no kid wants a high conflict divorce. So don't just fight to fight. Have a legitimate reflection on where you are and what do you want. Are you okay with being a alternating weekend parent? And that's okay. Like that, if that's okay with you, that's okay. It has to be okay with everybody else. If that's where you're going to go, then do it. Don't fight for 50-50 if you're going to get $100,000 in and go, I just don't want to do it anymore. Also, don't get into the fight if you're going to run out of money or run out of steam halfway through. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is really a close look at, are you ready for the road ahead? Do you really know what divorce means? And that's having a conversation with somebody who understands that it is a marathon, maybe an Ironman, and you just have to be ready to take some licks along the way. And so I think that's my advice, is really kind of do a gut check on everything, whether you're along the way, whether you're preparing for it. It doesn't matter where you are. Family law is dynamic.
Yeah, that's such great advice. That is such great advice. Keegan, I appreciate you coming on, and I definitely want to have you back. And
cool. I would love to.
Man, I certainly do. I literally could talk to you for another hour, but I appreciate you taking time out to come on, and we'll certainly do this again.
Okay.
I hate you've had to go through what you've gone through to gain this knowledge, to gain this experience. But I do appreciate you sharing it with other people. How can people find you?
Yeah, great question. So I am on Instagram, TikTok for as long as it's here with us. just fired up YouTube and Facebook. All are at Divorceology. So DIVORCEOLOGY. And just on that note, on the social media front, I try to post, short clips on topics that are most relevant to us as men in the process. So it's a great place to kind of go through and see some of the hot topics and hot considerations. I'm at divorceologydad.com. I've got, on my website, I've got a kind of very basic guide. Lots of people have no clue what's involved in divorce. What are the primary pillars of things to consider and think about? It's not like, it does not go deep into the weeds. That's not the purpose of the guide. It's to kind of level set and have you go, okay, this is where things are at and this is what's going to matter to me. It's free. My website, just go download it. And then my email is divorceologydad@gmail.com. Reach out, ping me. I do end up giving my phone number out, once conversations start going, we figure out where you need to go and what you need. But I make myself available. This for me is a passion thing. And I think that we as men can do a lot better job. So,
man, I appreciate it. Definitely reach out, look at your page. And, again, thank you for coming on. Definitely.
Thank you. Would love to come back, and I really appreciate the time and what you're doing. So,
well, you will. We'll definitely have you back on. Hey, and thank you all for listening to the Dad Dads podcast. You can find us on Apple or Spotify, as well as most podcast platforms. You can also find us on Instagram as well as YouTube. Do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and feel free to leave a comment. I do read every comment, and I enjoy about 95% of them. I love receiving the advice as well as the subjects as well. So, again, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next time.